Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Game Changer. I'm Mariam Zia. In today's program, we will be talking about a significant development that holds immense importance and implications for Pakistan's economic future. We will be talking about the recent development that Pakistan has reached a standby arrangement with IMF, and this arrangement is for 9 months and of $3 billion. And of course, we know that Pakistan has reached this agreement after months of negotiations. We will be talking about the future implications, the way forward, as well as the challenges when we talk about this standby agreement between Pakistan and IMF. And we will be also talking about the question that is this enough for Pakistan to pivot from immediate recovery to a long-term relief. To discuss this and more, we're joined in the studios by Mr. Hamza Rifat, who is analyst and expert in international affairs. Welcome to the program. We're also joined by Mr. Humayun Khan, who is senior analyst and expert in international affairs. Welcome to the program. And we're joined online by Dr. Hussain Javed, who is economist and senior analyst. Welcome to the program. Dr. Hussain Javed, let me start with you. Of course, this is a very important development when we talk about Pakistan's standby agreement with IMF. How do you see this agreement, and what are the immediate impacts that you see on Pakistan's economy?
See, first of all, this is you can call it a breathing space. After a very long time, we can have the sigh of relief, because it is just not about the 3 billion standby arrangement, but this is we can call it an achievement that is 2.5 of the last out of $6.5 billion. In total, it could be, I can say it is $5.5 billion. And I would say that in the middle of the standby arrangement, we must have to have more $5 billion, and it would be expected very soon. But the story is very much clear that it is not, we can say that it is the solution to our economy. It is not at all solution, but when somebody says that it is the IMF or no IMF, or we can live without IMF, it is not possible, because it is not the story started from the 2018, or it is the story started by 2023. It is a story since inception 1958. We have taken a total of the 21 loans from the IMF, 12 of which we can call a bailout. And in the past 60 years, we have borrowed more than 27 billion as per the current value of the SDR, the value of the represent of the graph in SDR, which is IMF currency, which is the last was about the 4.4 in 2013, which was not a bailout package. So there is a big difference and big debate on the bailout or non-bailout package. I'm not going to going on it, but your question is very pertinent in this behalf. Like IMF, what is the impact of IMF? What is the new IMF program? Or what is the standby agreement? And we must need to understand what is the effective external fund facilitation. It is not extended fund facilitation. So I am telling you about that the IMF staff and the Pakistani authorities have reached a staff level agreement on policies to supported by the standby agreement. It is standby agreement, SBA. So staff level agreement is subject to approval by the IMF executive board, with its consideration and expected by the mid-July. So it is expected by the mid-July. The new SBA will support the authorities' immediate effect to stabilize the economy from the recent external shocks and preserve the macroeconomic stability, and provide the framework for the financing for the multilateral and bilateral patterns. And it will also create the space for the social and development spending through the improved domestic revenue mobilization and careful spending execution to help address the need of the Pakistani people. And also I wanted to tell you about the concerns by the IMF. They have the biggest concern about the 2.6 trillion of the IPPs on our power sector. They have a biggest concern on our state-owned enterprises, which is about the 212, which is taken 2.7 of the 2.7 trillion of the total loss, and the total yield out of it is just 1%, which is must have to reform on the immediate basis. And there is another power, and after that, the pensionary accounts or the state-owned enterprises. This is the mega issue raised by the IMF, which is not just by the IMF. It is for us to plan this in a different way. So how the Mr. Porter issue, because Mr. Porter was the main concerned person who have the concerns for the biggest question mark for the all of the arrangement. So what he says that I am pleased to announce that the IMF team has reached a staff level agreement with the
Of course,
Pakistan
Pakistan
authorities
has
on
reached
a
a
9-month
staff
standby
level agreement.
which
And
is
how do you see, what are the key sectors which have been outlined when we talk about this staff level agreement? And of course, this will be considered, the decision will be made in the executive meeting that would be held after 12th July, somewhere near 12th July. So how do you see this is going to be impacting the current inflation and prices that Pakistanis are, facing?
This is why the Prime Minister says, and Mr. Sakdar continuously saying and emphasizing on this issue, that we have to think domestically. We have to think on the make in Pakistan. We have to explore the domestic, potentials. Otherwise, we cannot arrange the, long-term economic planning. So, what are the impacts? The more withholding taxes never to be refunded, surcharges and levies on essential goods such as oil and electricity, that would go high. Of course, unfortunately, they goes high if we are not talking about the domestic unleash. So even through these measures hurt employment and investment growth. And when the government misses its financial targets, the fund and Pakistan Financial Ministry agree on the quarterly mini budget, when often include new taxes on the school fee, bank transaction, internet access, and so forth. So then there is alongside dictionary of the tax policies, the IMF has forced the finance ministry into unplanned spend cuts without any real reforms. So which is very much important. And lightning thing is that the reforms is very much important.
Of course, this is very important, but when we talk about this standby agreement, do you think there would be some challenges, or what are the risks associated with this when we talk about the actual implementation of this standby agreement?
So, see, this is the standby agreement. We have come out of the default. We have come out of the technical default, but for the people's life, for the salaried class, it is a very precious, what we can call it. It is a pressure on the common people. It is a pressure on our economy. It is a pressure on the way of power sector. It is a pressure on our energy sector. It is a pressure on the taxation. It is a pressure on every sphere of life. So this is why we are going towards the economic recovery plan, which is going to under the SIFC plan, which is about the Ministry of Industries, Commerce, and other Board of Investment. But we need to have the technocratic setup over there, and we will have the arrangement. And they are thinking about to execute in the Balochistan. We will recover the Recordec and other resource, and we have to discover other opportunities for the economic recovery. Otherwise, we cannot compromise with this deal. Try to understand this IMF program is just a ray of hope. It is just a breathing space. It is just a sigh of hope. And now we are, but one thing is very much important. It is a gateway. It is an opening gateway to the Saudi Arabia. Now Saudi is going to give us the $2 billion.
Of course, we will be talking more about the role of bilateral and multilateral partners later in the program, Dr. Stan. Of course, we will be talking about the role of these bilateral and multilateral partners later in the program. But when we talk about this important development of Pakistan's standby agreement with IMF, how do you see this addresses the macroeconomic challenges that Pakistan is facing today?
Well, it does provide Pakistan with a breather. We needed a lifeline. There was a lot of negative coverage about the fact that we're going to default just like Sri Lanka. It hasn't happened, number one. And I think in the corporate environment, optics are very important. If you take a look at the manner in which the Pakistan Stock Exchange has surged up to 2,000 points, I mean, it all boils down to investor confidence. So when we talk about macroeconomic measures, I think the government of Pakistan does need to ensure that they can leverage the monetary policy as well as the fiscal policy in the right direction, increase revenue collection through taxes, and also make sure that the interest rate actually fluctuates to the point where that there's relief for the common man, and it also meets the IMF's obligation. This is an extremely tedious and cumbersome task. It's going to be very difficult.
What policy measures would be required for the implementation of this?
Well, first of all, they need to ensure that, as I said, fiscal policy to make sure that revenue collection actually takes place, ensuring that the tax net is widened, and obviously reforming the power sector. We're talking about trillions of dollars in losses in the power sector. To try and make sure that that does take place, you need domestic economic capacity. And for that, you need measures to try and make sure that they can resuscitate, the industrial sector to a large extent. I mean, it is all right to talk about the fact that, Saudi Arabia, China, and the United Arab Emirates would eventually give us, loans to try and make sure that they can resuscitate the economy. But it all boils down to domestic measures, how they try to revive the industrial base. Because at this point in time, when imports have stopped, exports are not going ahead. The current account deficit has widened to a large extent. I mean, talking about the practicality of reviving the economy without addressing the basic necessities to try and revive it is pretty much, it's limited to optics only. But what this SBA actually does is that it provides Pakistan with that ability to navigate its options. Now, the 30th of June, which just passed by, I mean, everybody was talking about the fact that Pakistan is going to go bankrupt.
Of course.
Now we have a roadmap.
Few hours before
it's just
the
a few
deadline.
hours, so just before Eid as well. So the point is that when you talk about ensuring that that lifeline is there, it's up to the government to adopt the macroeconomic framework that the IMF has suggested. Otherwise, we're going to go back to square one.
Of course. Mr. Umayyu, when we talk about this recent development, inflation control is very important when we talk about macroeconomic stability. How do you think this standby agreement is going to impact the price stability in Pakistan when we talk about the recent inflation rate is very high, of course?
I think this particular inflation rate that you're talking about does not only addresses the Pakistani problem, it's an international problem. There's a worldwide hike in inflation, particularly post-COVID-19 and also when Russian invasion of Ukraine. So the commodity prices, the blockchain supply was disrupted. So there was a massive inflation all around the world. Having said that, in case of Pakistan, it was also sort of felt more because our economic situation was not very well for last many years. This particular agreement that we have just recently signed, if you read Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's tweet, particularly on that, he clearly mentioned this thing that it was a very hard decision and this is not going to change the destiny of the country. This is, as Hamza was just saying, it's a breather for us. We need to change we need to do a lot of structural changes in our economy. This is also basically a very hard decision for the government. There is a vulnerable community within the Pakistan which is like living below poverty, and that has been addressed through Benazir income support program. That is also not enough, but that's just the beginning. On the other side, there's a tax-based community, which is like salaried class, which is like business community, which were already paying taxes, but now for the next 1 or 2 years, they have to pay more taxes. Why? Because no nation has ever recovered from borrowing money from other nations. So what we need to do is like broaden our tax bases, broaden our economic pie, by the way. We import more and we export less. That's basically the crux of our problem. What we need to do is we need to create a balance. And then one other important aspect Hamza mentioned, our power sector is something which is basically causing us huge problems. In a way, the circular debt is soaring from last like couple of years. Right now, our installed capacity is more, but at the same time, we have problems of load shedding. That's also a very tricky situation that, we keep producing more, but we keep having less. So people are not paying. So I guess there needs to be a very big structural reform that is needed in the power sector. Having said that, government also had another plan, which was the economic revival plan, which we just recently discussed.
Of course, we will be talking about economic revival program later in the program. But when we talk about macroeconomic stability, of course, this impacts the day-to-day lives of people. So how do you think government will be ensuring that after implementation of this standby agreement and later IMF agreement, when we enter into the final agreement with IMF, this is going to finally impact day-to-day lives of Pakistan? What policy measures would be needed?
I guess, as I was just saying earlier, this is just the beginning. We shouldn't be expecting that right now that we have just signed this agreement, everything will be hunky-dory. Things will take time. But we got this breathing space. Our external financing needs to be addressed, which will be addressed through this external financing. This SBA will help us procure financial agreement from bilateral and multilateral donors. Now that we are part of the international system, earlier we were not part of the international system because the IMF was not giving us this space. Now that they've given us this space, now friendly countries, multilateral donors, OIC, International Financial Institution, all of them are going to come, because right now IMF given us a stamp that this is like a stable country. If you give them the loan, they can return. That's basically the purpose of getting this agreement. And it's just like $3 billion, and Pakistan economy is huge compared to what we are getting. But we needed this stamp because of bad policies of the past years, because of the bad fiscal measures that we have taken in the past, and because of the structural changes that needed to be done, which we didn't do. So I guess now, if the mind of the policy makers are clear, the State Bank is clear, the Finance Ministry is clear, I think they will sit together. Inflation will gradually decrease. It won't decrease within a day or two. It will take a couple of months or maybe a year. But that's the time. That's exactly Prime Minister says. We got this breather. Now relax. We are not defaulting. We need to take long-term measures. Whatever government comes next, they will implement this particular project.
Of course, long-term measures are very important when we talk about any implementation program. Dr. Sen, how do you see, of course, the structural reforms remains an important part of this standby agreement. What needs to be done?
Actually, first we have to look at the challenges facing by the Pakistan, and then we can understand how the IMF can impact. So since the completion of the combined 7th and 8th review under the 2019 Extended Fund Facility in August in 2022, the economy has faced several external shocks, such as Humayun says that the inflation goes down in a year. Let me tell you about that. Inflation will not go down even about 5 years or 10 years down the road. So I'm telling about the numbers. So it is not an easy game, and even we are the part of the international financial structural game since from inception. So that is not easy that we can get out of it just with a breather. So let me tell about the catastrophic flood in 2002 and impact the lives of the million. Then it is a Russian war, and we still Russian war haven't get any impact out of their economy with the Russian war. But the international commodity price spike, of course, because the whole of the Europe is dependent on this, and there, you can say that taxation is high on the point. Even Italy is, the salaried class given the 50% of the taxes. So our policies and our arrangement in Pakistan, the new SBA would provide a policy anchor and framework for the financial support for the multilateral and bilateral partners in the period ahead. And the authorities have already taken serious of the important action ahead in the new program. So very important thing is the parliament has approved the FY24 budget in the line with the goal of the supporting financial sustainability and mobilizing revenue, which would enable greater social development and spending. So the important thing is a primary surplus of around 0.4% of the GDP by taking some step to broaden the tax base and increase the tax collection, which is very much important. And of course, the vulnerability of BISP is different. But the important thing is the proactive reduction of the inflation, foreign exchange framework, free restriction on the payment and transfer for the current international transaction, and multiple currency practices. Very much important. We must have to deal in ruble, we must have to deal in yuan, and we must have to deal with the Central Asian state in a different way. And we have to talk about the SIFC and economic recovery plan. You will, of course, you will talk later in the program.
Of course. Mr. Humayun, when we talk about these developments, of course, a role of multilateral and bilateral partners is very important. How do you see that Pakistan would be reaching out to these partners, and what are the current developments when we talk about the role of China, and of course, role of UAE is very important. Saudi Arabia played an important role, as well as Islamic Development Bank. So how do you see the things progressing forward?
I think there are like two ways to answer this question. One, when we were in negotiation with the IMF, there was a condition which was set that once we sign this agreement, these countries will help us, because we were supposed to do some structural changes. But without signing that, Chinese, UAE, Saudis and Islamic International Bank already helped Pakistan prior to signing this agreement, like a couple of months earlier. So that was like one way of addressing that these brotherly countries always stepped in when it's needed.
Assisted Pakistan with more than $3 billion. Right?
A, more than $3 billion, and then B, China basically roll over the existing debt that we were supposed to owe them in this fiscal year. And then they also promised to change it for the next year as well. Then UAE, Saudi Arabia also promised to invest more in China-Pakistan economic corridor in Gawada. Chinese investment came in again when the Chashma nuclear plant unit 5 was inaugurated a couple of weeks ago, maybe less than a week or 2 weeks ago.
So FDI is very important.
Absolutely. You know, the main reason FDI was not coming because a lot of countries were thinking that Pakistan is financially not a stable country. And when IMF put a stamp on this, that, you know, they're like making all the fiscal arrangements with us. So that's basically given guarantee to these international lenders. But having said that, these friendly countries was already there. Now, once we have IMF on our back, these friendly countries as well as other international financial donors, which includes World Bank, which includes Asian Development Bank, which include AIIB, which includes many other international financial donors. So they will be coming because Pakistan is a huge economy. This was like a glitch in terms of not making our house in order, which now we are supposed to do. So again, Hamza just mentioned that this is just a breather, and breather means that you are drowning. Somebody like pulled you up, gave you a breathing space and say, okay, now float. Now this is basically a floating period where we as a Pakistani nation as well as our government institution needs to implement fiscal policies in a very organized in a systematic way, and if we don't do it, we'll miss the train.
Of course, and that is very important. And the key question remains that how we pivot from this breather to the long-term recovery plan. Thank you very much, Mr. Humayun Khan, for joining us in today's program. We are talking about the recent standby agreement between Pakistan and IMF. We'll be talking more about different aspects of this agreement, but after Welcome back. We are talking about the recent standby agreement between Pakistan and IMF, and we are joined in the program now by Mr. Shehbaz Khan, who is analyst and expert in international affairs. Welcome to the program. Mr. Hamza, let me continue the discussion. When we talk about this agreement, of course, the domestic revenue generation remains an important aspect of this standby agreement. So, what measures are required by the government to ensure that the revenue is generated domestically?
I think for domestic revenue generation, first of all, you have to expand the tax net, number one. We talk about fiscal policy, it has to be directed. It has to ensure that, you know, people who are outside of the tax net, people who own assets abroad, people who are not part of the salaried class, are actually brought in. And that's going to be a monumental challenge for this government to try and make sure that everyone, regardless of their pay scale, actually, make sure that, you know, they give away taxes, number one. Number two, inflation can be cooled if the monetary policy or the interest rate is actually managed in a more prudent manner. But this is not going to be easy, because when the investment climate becomes a bit better due to the SBA, what's going to happen is that investors would be more inclined towards borrowing. So there's a natural inclination to try and increase the interest rate. But to cool inflation down, the monetary policy needs to be tinkered with through specialist economists and technocrats who have the experience of ensuring that the monetary policy can take place. This has never happened in Pakistan's history. I'm quoting an example from the United States where the US Fed ensured that, you know, the interest rate could actually be tinkered with. What that did was that it spooked the investors, but it ensured that inflation could come down to a manageable level. As you know, the previous speaker basically said, it's going to be an incremental process. For 5 to 10 years, you are going to see inflation
take place. Of course, but rationalizing public spending is also very important.
Yeah.
So what needs to be done for that?
For rationalizing public spending, I think, first of all, to try and make sure that investment is actually directed at social services. to try and make sure that more employment is actually generated. Pakistan's employment stands at staggering figures at this point in time. And to try and make sure that employment is generated, you need foreign direct investment to come in. We talk about money coming from the United Arab Emirates, from Saudi Arabia, from China. I think an integral role that most countries have actually played in ensuring that investment comes in needs to have a trickle-down effect on the local population. And that's where projects such as CPEC actually come in. They manage to generate employment opportunities. What that does is that it increases revenue. And when they have revenue, that increases purchasing power. And that has a positive impact on the overall, you could say, business environment. So it's not rocket science. It's all about taking those basic incremental steps. First of all, the fiscal policy needs to be directed at expanding the tax net, tinkering with the monetary policy, which is obviously going to be a long-term thing. Number 3 is to generate employment by providing incentives to many youngsters who are coming out, graduating from universities, both abroad and domestically. They cannot find employment in the country, to try and make sure that they can actually have some way of generating income. And automatically what that would do is that it would increase consumer spending. It would have a positive impact on the economy.
Right. So, Mr. Shehjar, what do you think the government needs to do when we talk about public spending and balancing it with the economic or social initiatives that are required for the public or economic development of the country?
So, Mariam, one of the most important points that Pakistan needs to take care of, like the long-term structural reforms, they will take time. So what is like something that Pakistan can do quickly, and something that Pakistan has been experimenting with, not very successfully, that is the privatization of state-owned enterprises. So these are like state-owned enterprises that have been like monumental when it comes to government basically subsidizing them or paying for their losses. This is like, this could be like PIA, this could be Pakistan Railways, this could
and
be
losses
like
are more than 600 million.
like so that's like increases our public sector expenditure by many folds, and that obviously that has to be fulfilled by borrowed money. So that's like one of the areas. That's secondly, bringing people into the tax net is directly proportional to documenting the economy. So we mentioned that most of the Pakistan's economy is undocumented. Export and import outflows in Afghanistan, like that's like causing a huge dent in Pakistan's economy. We don't know our forex reserves are being taken to Afghanistan. Our finance minister also like mentioned it in the press conference. So do we have like these checks and balances to document our economy? And historically there have been like certain sectors in our economy that are not really taxed. For example, agriculture, the retail sector. And whenever the government tries to implement any reforms in which they want to bring the retail sector into the tax net, there are obviously a lot of like blowback that comes from the mercantile class. So as a society, we have to basically decide.
So what are the sectors do you think that needs more importance from the government when we talk about structural reforms?
So definitely, first of all, we have to like thoroughly examine the whole economy and like see, which sectors are not be documented. And the government, even though it tries to like take measures, they can't really, and I personally think that's because of political compulsions. So first of all, we as a society, we have to decide whether we will be running on borrowed money, and those borrowed resources are depleting. This time around, Pakistan got a wake-up call in which a lot of like countries historically that have been funding Pakistan, friendly nations, like if you look at China, if you look at Saudi, like the Gulf GCC countries, they were very reluctant on giving Pakistan any bailout
and
funds.
One of the reasons was the lack of policy implementation when we talk about gaining the confidence of domestic as well as international investors. So what needs to be done to regain the confidence of these investors?
Mariam, I've like worked very extensively in the public policy sector. The biggest issue that comes in Pakistan's public policy implementation is the consistency of policy. Every time a new government comes in, they basically say we'll do something new, we'll do something different, and we will have a new way of resolving this conundrum that every government will go through. Every structural reform policy takes at least 5 to 10 years to give results.
Of course.
We cannot like afford to like have this inconsistency in policy reforms, and we have to like let these reforms like take the bitter pill and just like wait for like 5 or 6 years at least to let the reforms like take place. And if we don't like have this continuity in policy, all of these reforms will be short term in nature and they will not have the desired effect. You know?
So are there some mechanisms in place to monitor the implementation of these policies?
So Mariam, this is a very political question. This is where a charter of
Economy is
economy is required. That is when all these political parties need to sit together and keep this like the political fragmentation on the side, and like have this like bare minimum consensus when it comes to at least economic reforms, broadening the tax base, how to privatize the state-owned enterprises. Do you know one of the reasons why no political party touches the privatization system is because of allegations when it comes to corruptions from the opposition. So nobody wants to like take the plunge. You know, everyone blames each other, and like then this like whole reform process is halted. So a bare minimum charter of economy, call it whatever you want. Every political party sits down together and they basically come up with this like roadmap that these are the certain areas in which we won't be like indulging in politics. This is like something that we want to work on together. And then politics can be done on like 100 other things. Everything in Pakistan is political, but you know, this is like somewhere where a bare minimum consensus is required.
Of course, a consensus is required. Dr. Stan, when we talk about these challenges, what are some of the policy areas where steadfast implementation is required when we talk about these reforms that we keep on talking about in our programs?
See, to speak, generic, rather we have to speak very specific. So, on the basis of the specific thing, which is by the State Bank of Pakistan, there are just two areas. One is the State Bank of Pakistan, given the policy on the financial profiling or the financial restructuring. So there is a much difference in restructuring and reprofiling. So we are going for the restructuring. So restructuring in the SOE governance, state-owned enterprises must have to taken very seriously 212 state-owned enterprises, which is about the 2.7 of the trillion loss, and must have, they are giving the 1% of the yield. We must have to trickle down effect. By taking, the government has also decided the strength and viability of the energy sector. And energy sector, I have told you that we are on the loss of 2.6 trillion. So we must have to think on it. So, and the short-term issue, and under the economic revival plan, I must request that the agriculture, textile, IT sector, and small and medium enterprises must have the functional structure, financial execution, mechanistic plan for all these sectors. I would recommend agriculture for the tax holiday. I would recommend the textile for the tax holiday, and the IT sector and small and medium enterprise must be given a zero rating taxes, and you can get economic assistance to all these sectors. Then we can get some additional plan. So most important thing is fourth sector I'm pointing out. One is agriculture, textiles, IT sector, and SME, small and medium enterprise. Out of two, the agriculture and textile will give you the broad-based domestic net, and we are not going. We cannot hold and we cannot push the our people for the higher tax rate, because we are not giving anything out of the government. We are not the we are not like the European country, which is welfare state, and we are not the America where they are giving the small and medium enterprise ventures for the other people. Our government is not doing nothing for the common people, not about the health, not about the other things. So they must not have to take and push on the taxation area by the pull area, by the push strategy. So
of
the
course,
economic
Dr. Saib, when we talk about implementation of different strategies and policies and reforms, of course, institutional capacity building is very important and significant. What do you think needs to be done for institutional capacity building when we talk about implementation of these agreement?
Mariam, technocrats, and technocrats. We cannot depend on the planning division. We cannot depend on the Ministry of Commerce. We cannot depend on the Commerce Board of Investment. We cannot depend on the other departments, because they are under the bureaucratic structure as under the economic recovery plan. And I'm extending my special thanks to Pakistan military that they understand that the bureaucratic glitches are everywhere in the program. So we cannot do anything out of it. So if we have the targeted $100 billion of the FDI, it cannot come under the planning division, it cannot come under the small and medium enterprise, it cannot come under the Board of Investment. We have to use our graduate and the technocrats under the hierarchy, so we can get all these approach and wholesome approach from the vertical and horizontal programming. And if we are saying that we have to comprehensive program for enhancing the investment in agriculture, mining, information technology, or boosting export, or even for the unnecessary embedments of the exploration of the Cheniot ore or the Recordec or the whatever the Prime Minister says. This is only what we need is a technocratic setup, technocratic on the basis of meritocratic setup, and and this economic revival plan formulated by the federal government in collaboration with the Chief of Army Staff and provincial government. The plan was envisaged to provide ground 4 million jobs. So it can happen, but without technocrats, it cannot be possible.
Right. Right. Mr. Hamza, we are talking about this agreement with IMF, and of course this requires this agreement need for reforms in public financing as well. So what are the aspects of public financing that should be focused by the government, and what policy measures are required?
Well, first of all, the public finance measures that the government has to undertake needs to have a trickle-down effect on the population, number one.
Of course.
And number two, the public finance needs to be channelized in a manner in which it promotes investor confidence within the corporate sector. I think what we've seen with regard to, no disrespect to the BISP, but the fact is that, when you talk about public spending, it needs to have a meaningful impact on the lives of the common Pakistani. What we tend to forget is that, there's this narrative that the IMF is predatory with regard to the Pakistani population. That's not very true. They have really conditioned all the, you could say measures on the impact of this particular government to try and make sure that public financing is diverted towards the sectors which need, financing the most. Number one is the health sector. Number two is, the employment sector. Number three, you talk about, the corporate sector. So there are many areas that they can actually do to, channelize all these funds. And obviously, when you talk about social welfare programs, there needs to be an extension of that as well.
But transparency and accountability is also very important when we talk about this public financing. What needs to be done for that? What measures is government going to take to ensure transparency?
Well, as Shahryar mentioned, you need to have documentation of the economy. Otherwise, you will not be able to ensure that public financing is directed in a manner which actually has an impact on the population. The problem in Pakistan's history is that you've had pervasive corruption, which has resulted in public financing being diverted to other areas at the expense of the local population. That cannot continue. What needs to be done is that now that we have a breathing space, it's important to document even, you could say the black economy, for example, or the black market, where, and it's very interesting when the economy of a domestic country is actually, going into doldrums, the black market or the informal economy tends to, thrive. And that is the case with Pakistan as well. Because of the fact that it's not documented, it doesn't get that same sort of coverage. So the basic idea is to make sure that those sectors of the economy which are not documented are actually, encapsulated in a way that there is this ability to monitor whether the public finances that are coming from the government are actually channelized in the right direction.
Of course, and when we talk about these developments and these measures, of course, what are some of the reforms to enhance ease of doing business when we talk about gaining investor confidence of domestic as well as international investors?
So Mariam, that's also a double-edged sword. So as Hamza also mentioned previously, when we look at the State Bank and when it applies a very stringent monetary policy and increases the interest rates, it has an effect in controlling the inflation, which is very high, around 35 to 40%, we understand. But it also discourages investment. Cost of doing business increases many folds once when this interest rate is highest, in Pakistan's history, it's 22%. So it disincentivizes any investment in any sector in Pakistan.
So how to promote SMEs is when we talk about these measures and implementation of the Stand-by Agreement and later this agreement with the IMF?
So ease of doing business is one area where World Bank has been historically supporting Pakistan for last many years. So even in encouraging ease of doing business, there are very different areas that are needing much more attention from the Pakistani government, and one of the most important factors is contract enforcement. So when external investors come and want to explore Pakistani market, the biggest hurdle or like something that really stops them is the enforcement of contract. For example, if we bring our investment to Pakistan, who will ensure that if there are any issues that the government or the judiciary or like the, you know,
streamlining basically bureaucratic processes is very important when we talk about
so if
this.
we look at like historically a lot of like big investments that have come to Pakistan, and Recordec is a very good example, that is like where it kind of like discouraged international investment, because in the domestic arena, because of political compulsions or, you know, friction between various power institutions in Pakistan, that kind of like discouraged international investment, because investment doesn't have to be political.
Of course.
You know, whenever international firms invest in Pakistan, they don't like, they have to
there
make sure that
there
has to be consistent economic policies that should encourage investment, and the investment that comes to Pakistan has to be safe. And for example, if there are any profits, they can be easily repatriated from, you know, outside Pakistan. So these are like some areas where the IMF, Pakistan has made commitments, and that's why the import restrictions are now lifted. Repatriation of investment profits will be allowed now. In the last 6 months, you know, like a lot of like international airlines haven't been able to repatriate their money from us. So that like these are like signals that the government of Pakistan can give to the international investors that their money in Pakistan is safe, and the profits that they will be making can be invested again in the Pakistani economy, or they can be repatriated. Free flow of capital and labor has to be ensured.
Dr. Sain, when we talk about the standby agreement, of course, this comes with certain conditionalities. What are the timelines and monitoring processes for these conditionalities attached to this standby agreement?
Okay, standby agreement is about the 9 months plan. So it is the $3 billion would be divided into the 3 months. But hopefully we are acquiring the Department of Finance is try their level best to get them a midterm plan of about the $6 billion before the standby agreement. It is about the 9 month package, and between the 9 month package we can try to get the $6 billion more, about as we have taken the previous of the 2.5 billion out of 6.5 million. So this is a very optimal approach to get the maximum benefit out of IMF, because we are already into the plan and we cannot get out of it, because we have to give $23 billion of the interest in the same year, and in a total we have to give in all of the Asian Infrastructure Bank and other lending agency, we have to give the $55 billion of the total interest rate. And we are thankful to the other nation that other countries and the brotherly countries that they are giving the rollovers. After the rollovers, in any case, we have to give them back about $23 billion. So in that case, we have to take the most projects. And as far as we are making the plan of the economic recovery plan, which is very much important, and this, as the Pakistan Prime Minister also lauded the Chinese role to save the Pakistan from default, and beside appreciating the support of the Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates and the Islamic Development Bank. And of course, he says that the Premier says that we would not confine its role to policy making, and the government should confine their role in policy making and facilitation of investors. So you were talking very much good about that. IMF is just the breather. IMF just giving the ray of hope. IMF is just the opening of the gate, but it is not that it is just a very small thing. It is the biggest happening. It's a magnanimous happening. After 23 third time IMF program, nobody can go. I mean, any country can go default, but with all of the planning, with all of the understanding, we must appreciate our brotherly country, most the China. That they help us
role
a lot
of China,
in the,
UAE, Saudi Arabia is very significant, and Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif also
and
pointed that out.
And also the significant role of the Pakistan military, and we must have to appreciate by maintaining this agreement.
Of course. Mr. Shehryar, let's conclude discussion. And when we talk about implementation of this IMF program, of course, investors' confidence is very important, and public and private partnerships is very important. What measures would be needed by the government to promote the investors, specifically from business community and private sector, to invest in different sectors of economy?
So, Mariam, right now, in the short term, Pakistan definitely needs to do a lot more to, first of all, stabilize the economy. Attracting investment will
and
come.
joint ventures.
Joint ventures, they will like come
So what
later.
needs to be done?
So right now, we need to like make a special framework on doing reforms that are very necessary, and I think the priority sectors right now mentioned by previous analysts as well, the power sector and the privatization of state-owned enterprises. So this is like something that will take priority. Other than that, like how to efficiently broaden the tax net. Historically, what Pakistan government basically does is they basically tax the already taxed salary classes, and that is not the way to broaden the tax net. So to broaden the tax net, one, documentation of the economy, and secondly, to bring those sectors in the economy that historically has been operating tax-free in Pakistan. So these are some of the initiatives that really need to be taken much more seriously. Other than that, as Hamza also mentioned earlier, the monetary policy needs to be tinkered with, and it has to be investment friendly. Unless or until like the interest rates like remain at like 22%, that will like always discourage investment into Pakistan. So I can understand that these are stopgap measures, and like in the short term, we really need to stabilize the economy and like to avoid a default. So these are extraordinary measures.
Of course.
And what we have to realize is that when you ask for foreign direct investment, when you want other like international investors to invest in Pakistan, that will only happen after you get out of this emergency phase. And then you start like formulating policies for the next like 5 to 10 years on how to attract investment, and a lot of work on that has already been done.
Of course, economic revival plan
World
is
Bank
part
is
of
there
that.
to like
Right,
support
of
you,
course.
but we need to get out of this emergency state and like start regularizing the economy to make like these policies.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Shehbaz Khan, for joining us in today's program. Thank you very much, Mr. Hamza Rafat, for joining us in today's program. Thank you very much, Dr. Hassan Javed, for joining us in today's program. Of course, in today's program, we talked about the recent development of Pakistan's Stand-by Agreement with IMF. And this agreement is also a time of reflection for Pakistan when we talk about our economic conditions. And we should be aiming for that this and the upcoming IMF program should be the last IMF program for Pakistan, and we will be thinking about implementation of economic revival program, and this needs unity and resilience and a shared vision of the whole nation for a prosperous Pakistan. That's all from Game Changer tonight. Take care.